well, hello, my dear student. As you might know, my name is Tulio Miranda, and today we're going to have a class based on IELTS test, ETS. It's a class that will prepare you for the reading test. Why are you supposed to study reading sub-skills? Because the questions at the IELTS reading test are extremely focused on your capacity to manage strategically the use of these 5 reading sub-skills. We're always going to talk about 5 reading sub-skills. And technically, reading sub-skills are divided in 2 groups. Okay, the groups that the first group, which refers to the speeds or the level of profundity in which you read any given text, and the interpretation section or the interpretation group in which you're going to deal with the interpretation of vocabulary and text. These 2 ones are a very simple subject. That's why I expect to record this video class in just 15 minutes, right? So usually when you are working with any given IELTS reading question, you're going to combine strategically one of the 3 different reading sub-skills related to the speed and profundity, and then you're going to associate with some level of interpretation of or inference from the other 2. You're going to realize, we're not going to talk about this in this video, but as we talk about the types of questions and what is or which is the best strategy or the best combination of reading sub-skills to apply to questions, you're going to realize that these 3 first items or these 3 first types of reading are essential, or let's say they play a pivotal role in managing or answering the questions. So let's dive into it right away. Okay, so the first type of reading is called scan reading, and the problem with this is not the problem. The 2 characteristics, the 2 central characteristics that should be always present in your mind is that, well, when you're scanning a text, you can do that very quickly. And the problem with that is that the information, the level of information you are collecting, or the type of information you're collecting, is actually very shallow. And that's too bad if you're, for example, trying to interpret the text. But as you know, for example, we have 2 complete tables at the IELTS reading test. And in that case, you just need to spot some keyword, key term, or key number, or whatsoever in the text, and you might get another piece of information that is associated to that other one you use it as a reference, as a keyword, or as a key term to scan the text for. You might find also many instances, or you might find a certain number of repetitions of that specific term, and then you're going to isolate a sentence, isolate a part of the text, and then you collect the information you need. Scan reading is used to find items, to find elements in the text. That's why it said here, scan reading is ideal for spotting elements in the text that are relatively easy to distinguish from the sea of words in the passage, such as numbers, symbols, proper names, acronyms, etc. When you need to collect specific data from the text without the need of interpretation, or the need for interpretation, or cross-checking. Yeah, sometimes you need to cross-check information. You need to verify a piece of information that was referred in one part of the text in relation to other pieces of information in other parts of the text. So you will probably need to quickly isolate these items and then refer to them or interpret them. So scan reading is about finding information in the text, sometimes copying it directly from the text to the answer sheet, or to the question where you need the answer to be, or finding the information so you can isolate a greater portion of the text, maybe a sentence, maybe a paragraph, or one section of the text, and then reading it more carefully, so you can carry out with the process of the information collection. Now we come to skim reading. Skim reading is also referred to as gist reading. Well, I really like the expression skim reading because of the poetry behind it. Well, when you get the milk from the cow, the raw milk has a coat on top that is an accumulation of fat milk, and that cream on top of the milk that's rich in fat, we call it the cream. Usually it's called the cream. And when you remove this upper layer of the milk, you call that skim. All right. So skim means remove the superficial layer of something, especially the milk. And that's exactly what you do. So skim reading is good because it's relatively fast when compared to the, let's say, usual way people read things. And when you do that, you are paying more attention to the bigger words in the text, nouns, sometimes pronouns, but not necessarily, nouns, adjectives, verbs, sometimes adverbs, usually the big words in a sentence. When you're reading a text, usually you pronounce the words and sometimes you simply ignore the words. When that happens, it is important that you avoid pronouncing the words you don't need. So it's usually one kind of a game of silence and voice. You can whisper the words to yourself when you're reading, but you can also do that mentally. Even if you read the words mentally without uttering any sound, that's gonna anyways slow you down. So in order to avoid being slowed by your reading, it's important that you ignore some words. And it's good because you can, for example, cover fractions of the text more quickly than by usual, let's say, close reading or deep reading, which is the most slow type of reading you can find. So the disadvantage is that it's relatively superficial. It doesn't allow you to carry out exact interpretation of the ideas inside sentences and paragraphs. And that's really, really important for one simple reason. If you're willing to, if the question requires you to carry out interpretation of ideas or opinions inside the text, skim reading won't give you enough information, probably won't give you enough information or a fair ground to do this. You can use skim reading to isolate the part of the paragraph or the part of the text where the topic is being dealt with, and then you can read it carefully. And that's why it's so good. There are entire questions, there are types of questions in the IELTS test in which you can simply apply skim reading, and that will be enough for you to answer safely all the items in the question. Okay, so skim reading is ideal for mapping out the text. That's right. It's one of the most important things in any reading text, any reading test, in any proficiency exam. Being able to have the map, the chart of the text on your mind as you go about answering the questions, it's really, really useful when you know where the author starts and what's the path it's drawing, and then where he's going to finish. So it's really, really useful. And I think that that's one of the key reading skills to help you mapping out the progress of ideas inside the text is certainly this one. That means you can find out what is the sequence of ideas or elements of the passage you are reading. The same can be done in a paragraph, and that's really useful as well because you can quickly manage paragraphs. You can use skim reading to isolate a paragraph or sentence inside a paragraph. Yes, you can isolate a paragraph inside the text, and you can also isolate a sentence or a sentence or a couple of sentences inside a paragraph, so that you avoid reading unnecessary fractions of the text. Exactly. You constantly hear that you cannot afford reading the entire text in IELTS or TOEFL tests. So skim reading is usually the central skill that will save you lots of reading, lots of time, lots of energy, and help you conclude your text on time, okay, or before your time expires. Close reading or deep reading. I really like this expression, deep reading, but it's not so usual. Close reading is the most common term because you can read something closely with close attention, so that's the proper one to use, the most accepted. So the advantage of using close reading is that it gives you high resolution information. It gives you accurate insight into the ideas of the text. It's really important that you pay attention that here in the reading skill, you're dealing with the collection of items, words, expressions. You're not actually dealing with ideas, you're just dealing with the words and expressions. Here, you are actually getting a touch on the ideas, but you're still mapping bigger parts. You're mapping the ideas that are and how they are organized, but you're actually not stopping to pay attention to what the ideas have to tell you, or have to tell you closely. And then when you come down here, you say, okay, now I want to pay attention to what they have to say. I want to know, I want to concentrate my attention on what's being said, what's being done here, okay? So it gives you insight into the ideas. The problem is that's too slow. Many students that are not properly trained for IELTS reading test or TOEFL reading test, they will always resort to this, or usually resort to this, and they won't be able to finish their reading test in the on time, okay? So close reading is ideal for verifying information that requires checking / interpretation, usually opinions, facts, conclusions, premises, implied ideas, etc. Close reading is usually carried out after you use the scan or skim reading. This is really, really, really important to isolate a term, a key term, or a sentence. This is how this is the proper way to use close reading in any proficiency tests, by the way. Or a few, okay? So sometimes you don't simply isolate one key term or one key sentence, usually isolate a few. And then you carefully read word for word in order to get highly accurate information. And we'll be talking about this when we study sentences and cases to teach you or to help you understand how you're supposed to apply these combinations. And we will also provide you with formulae of how steps you're supposed to follow and the proper sequences of sub-skills you're supposed to apply in order to collect the information and answer the questions properly. So vocabulary inference and textual inference, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty much straightforward in its name and definition. Vocabulary inference, it refers to the ability of implying the meaning of a word or expression in the passage that might not be known on you and might not be clearly stated by the author in the text. At times, a word or expression may have a meaning that's not current as the most popular one. By means of the context, the way the author the way the author deals with the elements of the subject matter of his text, you will be able to infer the meaning of the words and terms, okay? So the meaning of words and terms, or the meaning of the words and terms in the text, okay? So that's right. You have to be able to interpret what is the proper meaning you're dealing with, considering the ideas or considering the way that the author is approaching the subject matter. Textual inference, it refers to the ability of implying ideas that are not directly expressed or stated in the passage. It is often the case with premises, implications, consequences, exclusions, etc. Some questions will require you to read between the lines and infer ideas that are associated with the case the author has made in the passage. So, as a matter of fact, in the IELTS reading test, we usually have two types of questions. Questions that deal with information. You have to verify information. It doesn't actually require you to be able to interpret the information. But some other kind of questions will deal with facts, whether they're false or true, or opinions, whether they have been given as such or not. So as you can see, there are two subdivisions in these two groups. One is concentrating on information and verifying whether the information was given or not, and then verifying facts or opinions and whether they are as such. They are stated in the question as they have been or they were supposed to be in the text.